All right, we are live. So, welcome anybody who's on here live. I am so excited to be talking with Michael Friedman. I've known him for a really long time and I've always respected him. He has been in the field of aging and advocacy for aging and mental health for more than 50 years. And he's a prominent advocate on issues at the intersection of aging and mental health. He's really known for founding and directing the Geriatric Mental Health Alliance of New York. The work that has come out of his advocacy has changed how geriatrics is in New York. So it's really amazing that we get to have him here. And interestingly, so Michael he's 80 and I am in my 50s. And so we're going to be talking about all the things from our own perspectives about aging. But a fun fact about Michael is that he is a jazz musician and a jazz photographer. So I was so fortunate. I think it was about 15 years ago, Michael gave me one of his photos. I got to choose from several that he had. And it was a real delight because he's incredibly talented. So another fun fact is that you can find his writing on Substack. So if you have never heard of Substack, you don't know what it is, go check it out. He has a really thriving column there on Substack that you should be checking out. It doesn't matter what age you are. It's always good to have an understanding of what age looks and feels like to someone who's in their 80s. So welcome, Michael. Glad to have you here.
Wow, what a wonderful introduction. I'm blown away. I'm reminded that when you were president of the Psychological Society in New York, you gave me the President's Award, right?
I did. You were so deserving of that. Most people think of advocacy as somebody going out and maybe getting involved in something, for a short term, but you did this for 50 years. You never hung up your hat. You just kept going. And you really always advocated for mental health with those who are aging. And so you deserved it. You still deserve it.
Well, it is true. This has been my career, and God, when did I start doing advocacy? In the 70s, a long time ago. And early on, I was primarily focused on children. And then as time went on, I became primarily focused on older adults.
You know,
Yeah, go ahead.
you've hit the whole lifespan, but you and I fell off the track from talking with each other for about 10 years, almost
Yes,
10 years.
yeah.
And we just picked up like a couple weeks ago, and it was like no time had passed.
Well, I've been reading your blog. I'm totally astounded that you put out one of these things a day. I'm doing a blog now, and I'm struggling to do one every 2 weeks. And it's just amazing. You write good stuff. It's interesting. It's well done, and you're doing it every day.
You know,
Really amazing.
thank you. But it was interesting that it took a blog by you and a blog by me to reconnect us.
Yes.
And, you and I don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything. So I'm excited to be able to talk about this because you and I agree on most everything, but we don't agree on everything. So I'd love you to talk about your most recent blog because that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily hear much about. And it really sparked me to think a little bit more deeply. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Well, you and I, as you said, come at this from two different perspectives, and those perspectives are very much driven by our age. You're in your 50s, you said.
Yeah.
I am 82. And one of the things that I've noted in one of my blog posts, as a matter of fact, that was when I was your age and I was talking about old age, I was uh, quite optimistic about old age. And friends that I had who were in their 80s at that time used to say to me, Michael, just you wait. And they were right, I'm sorry to say, Deborah. And I can say to you, Deborah, just you wait.
And that's what you're saying to me, because I write all these optimistic, um, blogs, and you were like, just you wait. And so tell me, what do we have
But
to
I think
wait?
where you're coming from is very important. You're saying to people in their 50s, don't be scared about getting older. There's lots of positives. Life can be terrific in many ways when you're older, and that's true. When I think back to number one, when I think back to when I became old, when did I become old? Older Americans access, I was 60. Medicare says 65. Social Security says 67, somewhere in there. So I focused on 65, as many people do. And it was a lot of terrific things. I became eligible for Medicare. I got to retire. I didn't have to raise money anymore. I've been in the not-for-profit world for all the years that you talked about, and I never loved the fundraising part of that.
I don't like that either.
And I became, I think, less stressed, less ambitious, and I had a bit more time for myself. And so there are many positives, not to mention discounts at movie theaters, and we get some real benefits as we become older. So I think the things that you're saying are very important to say to people who are approaching old age with a sense of trepidation about it. And it is important to combat the view that aging is just awful. It's not just awful. There are lots of opportunities, and people do very well in old age. Now, I'm coming from a different perspective.
Yeah,
That
I
is the
talk all the time
perspective
about
of,
how we should look forward to it, but your blog is 85 is not 65. So what
80
are you
is
talking about?
65.
80 is not 65. So talk about that.
Well, I think that what happens over time, again, I always quote my friend Alice, who is now 99. And beginning in her 80s, she used to say, the thing about aging, it's not good for your health.
Okay.
Well, you see, you smile because it's true. The fact of the matter is that for most of us, as we get older and older, we are more likely to develop all sorts of physical health issues. We're more susceptible to chronic diseases. Uh, our strength diminishes. I try these days not to talk about the loss of physical ability, but the decline or diminishment, because it's not lost, but it's less.
Yeah.
And I think it is. There are a few superagers. There are some people out there who get through this, and I hear about this all the time. But do you know, Joe is 95 years old and he's still running his own business and he plays tennis every day. Well, good for Joe. But there aren't many Joes out there. And the fact of the
What are
matter
you
is,
saying? Are you saying that we shouldn't? Are you saying that we should look at more like the general population rather than the people who are super agers?
absolutely.
Okay.
I think looking at the superagers, want to look at the superagers as superagers, that's great. That's something to know about. But if you want to use the superagers as examples of what it is to age, that's a huge mistake.
Ah, okay. I could
That's,
see that.
that's not where most of us are.
I can see that. I do think though, as a younger person, I want to know there are super agers out there. And by younger, I'm saying I'm in my 50s, you're in your 80s. I want to know that there's something that I may be able to look forward to, right? Because when I was younger, I thought turning in
Well, I
my
think that there are two different things. One is, yes, there are super agers, and that's a good thing for people to know about, and they can hope that they'll be super agers if what they want is to be young for the rest of their lives. Uh, but but you can have a good life without being a super ager.
What does that look like, having a good life without being a super ager? And
Well,
so a super ager is
it looks like me.
well, what's
I
different from
look okay,
you
don't I?
and a super ager? How are you different from a super ager?
How am I different from a super ager? Well, in the first place, I've got a ton of chronic health conditions. Uh, I have diabetes, I have gout, I have high blood pressure, I have a spinal cord injury, I have chronic kidney disease. You want me to keep going down the list? I mean, and that stuff interferes with my life.
Now, to me, sitting here, you still seem like you're doing so much and that you're doing everything. You are so involved in life. You write, you do photography at a high level. You're a jazz musician. You have a community of friends. You have all kinds of things happening. Is there something that you would say is lacking or missing there?
I think I have a pretty good life. And the point that I keep trying to make, I guess I write with a negative tone, and people are struck by my negativity. And I think that, as you know, my wife died this past summer.
I know. I'm sorry.
I'm still in the early stages of grief, and my next post is going to be about that. Uh, so, I mean, this is a hard time in my life emotionally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, because of that loss. So I think I lean to the negative these days, and that comes through in what I write. But I believe that people my age can have very good lives, albeit not the same lives that they had.
Yeah.
Not the same. So I don't have the physical abilities that I once had. Uh, there was a time when I was younger, when I was, believe it or not, a jock. I mean, I was a pretty good athlete. Take dancing. I went dancing the other night.
Did
Okay.
you?
Yeah. So I have, I have a jazz group, and the singer in the jazz group and I have become friends. And so she takes me places that young people go, and we went out dancing. Now, mostly what that meant was I watched her dance.
Okay.
So there was a time when I would have been on my feet dancing, and I was a good dancer. I would have been on my feet dancing for the whole time we were there. Instead, I was sitting at the bar with my camera, taking pictures of people who were in much better shape than I, who were actively dancing. So, what to say about that? It's
We
great.
all are, though. Isn't that how we all are? Because I'm not the same as I was. I always tell my students, you can outrun me, but I'm happier than you. Because, I don't care. I'm not keeping up with the Joneses anymore. I don't have all of those things that, I already know who I am. I'm not trying to find myself. Um, you know, I, I believe that as we grow older, we do change, but that we can retain a lot of our emotional fortitude that we've built up over the years. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that?
Both. Enough with the Aristotelian law of excluded middle. It has to either be or not be.
Okay.
A lot of things in life are both. So let's just take what you've said. My emotionality has changed considerably. Now, a big chunk of that is the fact that I'm a widower.
Well, yeah.
So, um, I will find myself from time to time just sort of crying for no reason at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes I know the reason, sometimes I don't. Uh, I cry at strange things. It's like sentimentality. So I cry sometimes when I realize how alone I am. And I cry once I was watching my granddaughter play soccer and I suddenly started to cry because it was so wonderful to see these 9-year-old girls playing soccer and to know that they were going to grow up and become women and have a life. I'm getting emotional as I talk now. Uh, so one of the things that's changed with me, and I suspect I have no, you know more than I, you're the psychologist. I think that at a certain point in age, people be, people's emotions open up more.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I agree. I do agree with you with that. That's a sort of a development in a positive way. I think, what you're describing is that we experience more. There is a lot more loss as we get older. You just really do start to experience more loss with age for most of us. So some of the feelings or emotions that we're experiencing are different and new and not pleasant. Um, and we're not prepared for that. I mean, no one's prepared for that.
Well, I think we're absolutely not prepared for that. And my next post is entitled, I Was Not Ready for Death, Are You?
Oh, good one. Yeah,
And
who's ready for that?
well, I think none of us are. I mean, you'll see what I say in the post, and I'm not sure what can be done about that. I'm hoping that people, if they read what I've written, will be a little bit more prepared for what happens as you lose people. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's but in this society, we don't deal well with death.
No, we don't. Um, you're
Now,
right
of course, that's true at any age, but the point is, as you get older and older, you have more loss. So, in this past year, I've lost my wife. I had a long relationship, non-marriage, before I married a wife who I was married to for almost 49 years,
about.
and that woman died several months before my wife.
Wow.
And a very close friend died this past year. So, I mean, I had one of those years that are more and more common as you age, where you just lose a bunch of people who are really important to you. And it leaves a kind of hole in your life that is, I don't know, I'll see over time to what extent it can be filled.
Yeah.
Uh, as I've said in what I've written, I'm doing what you, the psychologist, would tell me is the right thing to do. I'm busy. I'm doing things that I even like to do, they're important to me. I've got people in my life, and that deals with the loneliness to some extent, but there is some core connection that I've lost. I mean, I think about this in metaphysical ways, but I think that my wife and I had together a single shared life that transcended the everyday. And that's what gets lost. And again, it's not that you have to be old for to have that to happen. Younger people have that kind of loss, and
Yeah.
there are older people who don't. But the older you are, the more likely you are to have that sort of loss where the real core connection that gets developed in good long marriages. Uh,
You know, the loss that isn't talked about and that we all start to experience more starting in midlife and to the end of our lives. It's so jarring because you're moving along and then there's like a wall that you hit. And it's sort of, you look around and you say to yourself, why am I doing things? You question things. There's a lot that happens and it's just not talked much about. I'm glad you're writing about that. I'm glad that you're going to be filling that void, the void that people don't talk about. How, people want to have relationships as they get older. They want to do things that people just don't talk about. And how we're still whole individuals as we age. And, a lot of people don't like to think of us as that.
I guess, yeah. Well, one of the things, there are any number of things that are striking to me, but here's one. Marriages that don't end in divorce end in widowhood.
Yeah, you're right about that. Gosh, nobody talks about that.
No, I mean, what I'm experiencing now is a perfectly common thing, or a terribly common thing would be a better adverb, I suppose. But it's a common part of life.
Yeah.
And there isn't much talk about it. I've been in this field of geriatric advocacy for a very long time. And when we talk about widowhood, we talk about, correct me if I'm wrong, we talk about the fact that a lot more women than men are widows.
Yep.
And we talk about the fact maybe that men who are widowed are more likely to take their own lives than women are.
Yep.
But the everyday stuff of being a widow, I have never heard discussed.
No, the whole emotionality is taken out. There's
Yes.
facts that are presented. People present facts. But anybody who's experienced anything, if I were to say, I'm going to give you all the facts about what it's like to fall in love, it's different. When people are given the facts of what it's like to be in an intimate relationship, it's different than when you're it's, the feeling is what makes it. And you're right. The day to day is what we're not prepared for. We are given facts, but how are you going to feel? How is the world going to change? Is the view that you take on going to change? Is it going to remain the same? Will there be an emptiness? Will there be a loneliness? The emotionality of it is not talked about at all. And that's what I'm seeing also about midlife. Midlife, people don't talk about the emotional aspects of midlife. They talk about things. They'll say, oh, and then you'll hit menopause. Oh, men might have low testosterone. Okay. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like? And, we don't talk about how you get a liberated feeling when you hit a level of expertise in your areas, or maybe you might feel liberated with empty nest. Maybe you won't. But these sorts of things are often just presented as facts or stages as opposed to
And
emotion.
often in abstract terms.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And certainly one of the reasons that I am writing as personally as I am in my blog posts is to try to at least give one example of what the experience is.
Yeah.
So,
Give me first of all, share your blog if you can. Just hit paste in the comment so
yeah,
that
I'm not
people
sure.
who are watching can find your blog. I will tell people that your blog is on Substack. And what's the title of your blog?
One very old man, thoughts
One
as I near the end of my life.
One very old man. And you do write with a lot of you remove the abstract with everything. So thank you for posting that. I'm just going to make sure it got up there.
I see it there.
Okay, good. Oh, wait, hold on. You put it in the private chat. I'm going to put it in the main chat.
Okay.
Okay, so
Oh, I see.
I'm putting it out there right now. So check out Michael's Substack, because even if you aren't thinking about aging. Our whole goal in life is to age, and to get older. So it's so important to find out what people are thinking and feeling about age, their perspectives, what their and yours isn't coming from out of left field. You have all the research and all of the that you have 50 years of working in geriatrics behind everything that you're saying. So there's a lot there. I would definitely check out your Substack. So for anybody listening, definitely check it out. It's super important. But can you tell us that last blog that I wanted to walk us through it? Walk us through the emotionality of it, because I felt it when I was reading it.
The emotionality of
The last blog that you wrote.
which one was that?
Well, it's not the last one, but the one that reconnected us, that 80, 80, 80 is not
Not
the
60,
80 is
80
not
is not
65.
65.
Yeah.
Well, I have focused in on three ways in which 80 is not 65, and that's not fully adequate, but at least maybe one can remember 3 points. And that is that there's physical decline, there's frequently mental decline, and there's loss. So with how do I say, let's start with physical decline. I feel my body has betrayed me.
So you feel that your body has betrayed you.
Absolutely.
When did you start to feel that?
Probably when I was 70, I had a tumor inside my spinal column, and I had surgery for that. And as a result, I have spinal cord damage, and I had to go through a period of learning how to walk again. And recovery from one point of view took a few months. I actually had my 70th birthday party within a couple of months of having the surgery, but it was a good year. And not a good year. I mean, it took a year to have more substantial recovery. But what's the result of that? The result of that is that I've been in chronic pain since 2 years before the surgery. So that goes back to 2011. So for the past 14, 15 years, I've never had a day without pain.
Oh, wow. That
now
is a betrayal.
There are times in my life when that pain has been so severe that I really needed heavy duty painkillers to deal with it. Fortunately, most of the time, it's just a pain that's there. I've gotten used to it. It's sort of in the background. But as a result of that and other things, I have balance issues. I'm just about to give my car to my daughter.
Oh. So it's affected your driving.
Yeah. Well, at least it threatens to, and has. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question about what the emotions are, but I walk with a cane. Why do I walk with a cane? Because if I don't walk with a cane, I'm going to fall down.
Yeah.
Now, I've gotten adjusted to that. I, in fact, would argue that maybe even most people my age should be walking with canes, because falls are such a significant cause of premature disability and death. And we have a terrible attitude about canes. So I've gotten used to it, but I don't like it. I don't know that I'm describing the emotion. But
No, you are. Betrayal is that is a feeling, right? And that's a powerful feeling, to feel betrayed by yourself, and by your own body. The way you're describing it is you're saying how you are much more limited than you were before. You were an athlete when you were younger. You enjoyed dancing, and now you're thinking you might have to give up your car.
Yeah.
an emotional thing. Those are not just listing off things that you mentioned. That's a betrayal. And I can understand when you say that how that would be, because these are things we all take for granted. And then suddenly
You know,
have that.
there are other things like, and I have diabetes, and I've gotten past the point where any of the medications work for me, so I now have to give myself insulin injections twice a day. Is it a big deal? No. Is it a big deal? Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I don't like it. I don't like it. So I mean, I don't know that I'm capturing the emotionality of that. And uh, as you mentioned earlier, low testosterone, common among men as they age. Uh, Sexual capacity diminishes. Uh, I'll refrain from discussing my own sexual situations, but it's not like it was when I was a young man. And that's a terrible blow psychologically.
Yeah, absolutely. Those
So,
are things that I have, I write about midlife and aging and all the things we have to look forward to. And I don't write about what you write about. You write about what sucks, and I'm always writing about, how we can feel really good, right? And feel, take the emotional component and maybe reframe things. But you're talking about things that it's very hard to reframe not driving. It's very hard to reframe some of the things that you're talking about. And so, it's important to have the full picture. I think that for me, I was so excited to read what you were writing, because you complete the picture. You say, hey, it isn't all roses, and we shouldn't be thinking of it that way, because, we're tricking people into thinking that they get older and it's going to be some fabulous, great time. And I think there's real importance in hearing that there are everyday challenges that exist that affect us emotionally.
well, I think that what you say is important to say as well. So we live in a society where ageism is common, and ageism is fundamentally the belief that aging is just a terrible thing. Uh, and that's not true. Aging is not just a terrible thing. But I do think that in our field, uh, geriatric advocates have gone too far in denying the aspects of aging which are far less than great, to understate it. So, the first blog post I wrote was called Realism About Aging is Not About Being Old, is Not Ageism. There are things that happen as you get older. And again, there are physical changes, there are mental changes, and loss, I think, is a very big deal.
Yeah.
Uh, and these things are real, and they contribute to, uh, what I'm writing about now, which is about facing death, is the emotional journey is of being the partner of somebody who's dying.
Yeah.
Uh, so for the person who's dying, there's obviously an emotional journey as well. But I've, for obvious reasons, have become particularly interested in the emotional journey of a person like myself, who was the partner of a person who was dying. Um, the One of the things that I will write more about at some point is what I'm calling grief before death.
Yeah.
Um, Now, saying what that is, I think that the word grief covers up a lot of what's involved.
Tell me about that. What do you mean by grief is covering up a lot of what is involved?
Well, I think that when people think about grief, they think sadness.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more than sadness. It's this emotional overflow.
Yeah, you're right.
It's not just I'm sad that my wife died. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm not just I miss her.
Yeah.
I sleep in an empty bed.
I think
I'm
people don't talk
lonely.
about that.
I am lonely.
Yeah.
And again, I'm doing all the right things, and that's what people should do. I don't want to discourage people from doing that.
Right.
They really should get out there and do things that interest them and give them pleasure, and they should be with people. But I'm telling you, when you're going through grief, there is some core loneliness, and that is very painful. I was with a woman yesterday whose husband died a week or two ago, and she was talking about some of her experience, and she was talking about how difficult it is at night when she's alone, and there's nobody there,
Right.
and he used to be there,
Yeah. That's
and you feel the presence of the person who's gone. Mhm. So I don't sleep well. I'm up in the middle of the night. The bed is empty.
yeah.
So
And there's nothing that a person you
and
can't change that. That's a really tough thing. And people I'm glad you're going to be writing about that because people don't talk about that. The empty bed is a huge one. You're supposed to be going to sleep and having peace, and that's when a lot of people feel the least amount of peace.
yeah, no, it can be really tough. Again, I'm speaking largely from my own experience, but everybody I've spoken to the extent to which I know the literature, it's a big deal. It's a
It is a
big
big deal. I'm sorry you're going through this,
different.
first of
It's
all.
different also with different marriages. So I
Yeah.
don't. I was married for closing in on 49 years. Uh, there's a kind of closeness that develops over that period of time, which is different from the early passion of a relationship, I believe, and certainly that was true of our experience. But what we had was a life that had, I said this before, it was in a different dimension. It was a shared life.
Yeah.
Uh, and all of a sudden, that's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's nothing to prepare us for that as we grow older. And people have lost at different ages. Um, and that loss can feel different depending on who it is, what life stage you're in. But speaking about what you just said before, is that when you're thinking of your own death and you've just experienced a death of someone close to you, that's something that we don't usually grapple with. That's not something that we usually talk about or think about how you deal with both of those at the same time.
So that's interesting. That's interesting. Need to. Uh,
Because there's more than just the loss that you're experiencing. You're experiencing the loss. You're also experiencing it's me next, potentially.
not potentially, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
not potentially. I'm
Right,
82. I'm 82 years old.
right.
I've got a bunch of health conditions. My nephrologist tells me that if I live, I'll be on dialysis in 4 to 5 years. 5 years if I'm really lucky. I, I don't have that much time left, and I'm quite conscious of that, and that's another dimension of what I experience. I might experience that even if my wife were still alive. Uh, though
Yeah, yeah, but it's still
now I
it's
experience it
complicated.
as death alone. You
Yeah.
know. So now there's nobody there in the middle of the night.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, a couple of weeks ago, when I was really feeling not well in the middle of the night, debating should I go to the emergency room, should I not go to the emergency room. My daughter was out of town, and I suddenly realized I had nobody to call
Yeah.
where I
That's
could expect or feel comfortable
right.
ask, asking for help.
I don't
So
think
yeah, the emotional experience is very powerful and unpleasant, to to put it mildly. And I hope I capture some of that in what I write. So,
you do. And I'm able to feel what you're saying as well, because when you talk about this, it makes me think about it and the emotions of what it feels like. I can picture the bed. I can picture what it would feel like. Um, and for you, to be thinking about yourself as well. It's very complicated. Our lives are much more complicated than we make them, right? Than we portray them to be. But there's so much emotional complication, and that doesn't decrease with age. That we need all of that we've learned from the earlier stages, like we start out as toddlers throwing ourselves on the floor when we're frustrated, having a tantrum, learning coping skills, and you need all of those that you've honed and developed over the decades to get to where you are now, because it's complicated and heavy.
yes, I think that we learn to control our emotions as we
Yeah.
obviously as we move from infancy into to adulthood, and there is a dimension of old age in which we become better able to handle emotional experiences.
Yeah.
So, in the same way that a child learns that the pain of a cut on their finger is going to go away, and so it doesn't cause them to break out into tears every time they cut themselves. Uh, as we grow older, we learn that, okay, things like this happen. We've been through it before. We'll get through it. At least sometimes that's the way we think. Of course, there are also people who give up hope in old age.
Yeah, I've seen both, the super agers and those who give up. And one of the things that I notice is that people who are good at processing things tend to do really well. And that's part of, you're doing that actually. You're processing everything, you're writing about it, you're talking about it, you're still going out. Grief is terrible. There's no upside to grief. Um, but I think that those who can come out and say there's still stuff in it for me in life are the people who've been able to process it. And that's going through that sort of walking that dark path for a while. Any of us who's lived through a grief of losing somebody knows that it's a terrible walk you go through, and there's no pleasant way out of that. You just have to process and keep moving, and you have to allow yourself to feel it. But as we get older, we experience it more and more and more. It's not,
Yes,
and it's not
but
talked
it
about.
is remarkable how common it is and how many people get through it.
You're right. People
somehow.
get through it.
So,
And
back
you're
to
still in the early
your
stages.
glass is half full, my glass is half empty. But, your perspective on this is also right. People get through this.
Yeah,
Uh,
they do. And you are. It's not pleasant, and I feel for you because you're right in it. And I met Harriet. She was really nice, really lovely.
yeah, she was a lovely person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my
Um,
daughter.
you know, I will say this, that as a midlifer, I I feel very optimistic, even knowing that I will continue not to I'll be running slower and slower as I get older, and that I'm gonna be moving differently and having some losses of things, like you were mentioning, potentially not being able to drive. The one thing I look forward to is, obviously the connections, like how you got emotional over your granddaughter, playing soccer, the feeling of those that we have that are still there, but also knowing that I can still put stuff out into the world. How do you feel about that? I feel like every time I'm not slowing down with putting stuff out. I keep getting excited about new things and wanting to put things out. And I know that midlifers often feel that way. And I know that you continue to do that. How do you feel about that? Does that bring you any
Personally, it's important to me to be doing something that makes some difference in the world.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's something that I have always felt strongly and continue to feel strongly. I think that as people age, however, there are different stances on that. I wrote an article some years ago that was called The Moral Obligations of Old Age. Well, that raised a storm for some people because there were some people who said, right, we continue to have obligations, social and moral obligations, and we should be participating in the world, et cetera, et cetera. And there were a whole bunch of people who said, uh, I paid my dues. Now it's my time of life. Now I get to do whatever I want to do, and I don't have any obligations to anybody anymore. Now, I happen to think I don't, I mean, that's not me, but I guess it's all right for them. Uh, but again, the only point I'm making is that different people respond in different ways to this sense of having, again, what I experience as an obligation to do things that contribute to a better life. Now, I've changed. A year ago, I said, okay, enough with being a social advocate. I'm going to devote more of my time now to jazz and to the kinds of things that give me not just personal satisfaction, but jazz. And this is something I have written about. I'll write about again. Jazz is my access to the transcendent.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Tell me about that.
well, I think that there. How do I tell you about that? Well, I think number one, that an important aspect of having a really satisfying life is having some sense of connection with a transcendent reality. Uh, I happen not to be religious, probably wouldn't be regarded as spiritual by most people because, in fact, I'm an atheist. But art and music are spiritual experiences for me. So sometimes when I'm playing jazz, jazz, of course, is largely improvisation. So things happen. And sometimes the improvisation is pretty much something I've done before. It's knowing the mechanics and how you get it done. And sometimes it just opens up into something really exciting and different, and it's musically a revelation. Uh, it's not necessarily the revelation of any divine being, but it is musically a revelation. That's what I call achieving transcendence. I have the same thing happen with photographs. So, many people think that taking a photograph is pointing a camera at something and taking a picture. Well,
You're finally doing this is something that I was just talking to somebody about, how important it is for us to be able to get to the point where we're not doing the things that are outward focused, that we're focusing on ourselves. And you're doing that with your art, which is photography and music. You've been advocating for 50 years, which is an outward focus.
right.
You made impact. And it's so important for us to know that we should be transitioning as well to how do we get stuff for ourselves. Like you said, it's spiritual for you. That's powerful. That's a big deal.
So I think that, I agree with the gist of what you're saying, and that is that for those of us who have been focused on making the world a better place, there comes a time when maybe we stop doing that or stop doing it as much, and we begin to focus on making our lives better.
Yeah.
That's sort of restating what you said. I'm not sure that it is best described as outer versus inner, because the cultivation of self that I experience does connect me, at least, with when it really is good, it connects me with something outside. The transcendent reality in art is something. Music it's more evident than in art itself. In the musical performance, there's first of all a communication among the musicians that in part can be mechanical. We know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But God, when we hear each other, when we really hear each other, it is an intimate experience.
Yeah.
And when there's an audience and the audience gets connected with that, look what's happening here. It's going from self to group to those who are observing. And what makes it all possible is that we have a shared cultural history. When I play jazz, I'm not a great inventor in jazz. Obviously, I'm not a great anything in jazz, but I have absorbed in some way the long history of not just jazz, but classical music in what I experience. And the people I'm playing with have that same shared cultural history, the people who are listening. And it is a great unifying experience. So, yes, it's about self, but it is about something that spans beyond self.
I
And
get that. I get that. It is different though than when you're advocating and you're focused
absolutely, absolutely. Now
on
that's I
others, making the world better for others.
yeah.
But it's interesting, and I do think that that's something that we should be aware of, is that we should be thinking that it's a good thing to pursue the things that make us feel good, focus inward on ourselves. And, um, a lot of people feel like they can't do that because they feel guilt if they do that, or they feel like if they're not giving to others, they, are not doing what they should, which is wrong. That's just not you should be doing for yourself?
I think what you're saying is right. Uh, I do think that, Candide, right? The famous line there, it's time for us to cultivate our gardens.
Hmm.
And so this is a period of tremendous violence in the world, a period of despotism. And these are people who have somehow managed to escape and to have their lives. And they realize that there is nothing that they can do to change the nature of the world at that moment in history. And so they say, it's time for us to cultivate our gardens. And I think that applies to the process of growing old.
Yeah.
At a certain point, you've sort of done what you can do, and now you can cultivate your garden. But I think, this is me, the moralist speaking, I think that the concept of cultivation is very important. It's not just that we're relaxing and having a good time. We're
So
cultivating our garden.
yeah, I think that
That's
that's the word.
totally arguable. And if my wife were here, she'd argue with me. She'd say,
Um,
leave me alone. I just want to read my books and
that's
go
funny.
out with my friends. And I don't want to be bothered with all that.
It's funny that you say that because I was talking with my husband last night and I was saying to him, he and I disagree all the time about certain things. And I had written an article a while back that got really a lot of backlash. I wrote how, ageism is not the same as it used to be, that we're making a lot of progress. And I got so much hate mail for that. I wrote it on Substack and put it out in other places. And I think it's Psychology Today as well. And I actually got hate mail from people saying you're ruining the trajectory of, the activism towards getting ageism to be removed from the world. And so, at any rate, I said, hey, we need to keep doing this. We need to keep talking about how things actually are getting better. We're making change. It's working. If you were to Google in the year 2000, old man, you only got Santa Claus. You move that up a couple of years later, and when you Googled old man, it was people who were victimized and who were frail and feeble and completely decrepit. And that has changed. And we're now voting people into office, whatever your political affiliation is, who are older. We are, that the Beatles song, When I'm 64, people are still working at 64. That's not considered old anymore. These kinds of things have shifted and changed. And he was telling me, it's not that great. Aging isn't great. Ageism still exists. There's ageism that's still out there. And I think that they both live together. Yes, there is. There always will be. And there's ageism for young people, there's ageism for old people. And when I talk to you, I'm reminded of how complicated and complex aging is, because we're living with something that's not balanced ever. We're living with something that's fluid and moving and changing. Aging was different 50 years ago when you started advocating and nobody even thought about aging.
That's
You know,
right.
it's completely different. Had you not, it was the Wild West when you started. In the 90s, when I started and I told people that I worked in aging, they were like, trying to run away because that was like boring and something nobody wanted to talk about. But it's not like that now. People are talking about it now. You're giving more complexity to it. You're adding to, you know, the sort of Pollyanna approach that I often give to aging when I talk about midlife.
Uh, I think that the perspective that you're offering is important. I've said that. The You're right that ageism has changed. And if anybody says you're not right, I don't know what world they're living in, except that they have an imaginary world which is important to them in some way. And one of the things, I'll go beyond that, that has always annoyed me, I'll say it mildly, has always annoyed me about advocates, social advocates, of whom I'm one. It's never better. So I wrote about this many years ago, that in
What do
mental
you mean?
health advocacy, every year it's worse.
Oh,
I wrote something where I said, for God's sakes, doesn't it ever get better? And do you
yes.
think you're going to you persuade legislators to pass some legislation to make things better? They pass the legislation, then you come back to them and you say, well, it's worse this year. Well, what are they going to conclude from that? What's the point? Nothing I
Yeah.
do matters, right? It's very important what you're saying. There has been progress, and there's been progress because of people like you, people like me, who have been out there saying the things that we're saying. So stick with it. I mean, you're right, and the advocates, they can't deal with their own success.
Yes. I kept saying, because it was all advocates who were in the field of aging who came at me with, I could not imagine the venom that I was going to get from the article that I wrote. And I thought to myself, you should be applauding because you were part of this journey. But I think it makes them feel like, um, because it's getting fixed, because it's getting better, because there's more out there, that it diminishes their work in some way, or
Well,
which is ridiculous. But
I think that they would do considerably better to say, look at the progress we're making.
yeah,
Not there yet, but look at the progress we're making.
exactly. We have to applaud the progress along the way, which,
As you say, I've been a mental health advocate. I've worked on issues related to severe and persistent mental illness, as we used to call it, whatever it's called now, some new euphemism. But uh, a couple of years ago, somebody wrote a piece about and said that it's worse now than it was 40 years ago. And I wrote an article that said, Jesus, do you have any idea what you're talking about? I used to every week go visit a state hospital. And I
yeah,
know this piece, I described what life in a state hospital was like 40 years ago. You're going to tell me it's no better than that? Don't, it's a lot better than that. And it's
yes,
gotten a lot better, and it's gotten a lot, not good enough, but it's gotten a lot better. And it's gotten a lot better because people like us have plugged away at this and plugged away at this and plugged away at this. And I think we're better off saying to the people in power, look, it's getting better.
I agree with you. We should be saying it's getting better. And and you're still continuing on. You're still writing, you're still advocating, and we're still, like, you're still navigating the wild wild west. You're saying, I'm going to uncover for you what exists, 80 and older, and how that looks and feels. And I think that we need to just keep moving on. We need to say, here are our wins. Here's where we're getting it right. Here's where we're getting it wrong. Oh, there's somebody that has a different thought. Let's merge that in and see where we are here. I think that discussions that we can have and continue, like we are now, coming from a different places, is important for us. I You made me take a step back and say, oh, I better look at both sides of the coin here. I need to look at, am I setting up people to feel like everything's great, and we don't need to look at the future and some of the losses that we're going to have, and address that and deal with that so we can process it. So I think that even though you are saying, you're taking a back seat to advocacy, I think you're kind of still doing it right now.
Well, I guess so.
You can't take it away from you. You're gonna.
No, it's sort of in my blood, and
You know,
I think that And I think I've been consistent with this over my career. I have always preferred talking about the reality um, to well, I mean, there's in advocacy, some people sort of make some things up. I've always been opposed to that, but
Yeah.
I don't think I think what you're doing is a very important thing to do. Old age is not the end of the world. Well, it's getting close to it, but
But it's
but you know what I mean.
it's close, but it's not the end.
Yes.
That's funny.
And it really is possible to have a good life and be old. And it's possible to have a good life and be old in the way that I'm old,
Yeah.
which is a bunch of physical problems. We didn't talk at all about my mental decline, which we could have talked about as well, because I have elements of that. And because there's a lot of loss in my life, as there is in, I think, the lives of almost everybody as they get to be what I'm calling very old, and people yell at me, it's not very old. You're not very old until you're some other age. But whatever, as you get older, these are the things that happen, and they're real and they're tough.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you can't have a satisfying life. And
So I'd love to continue discussing more things with you on a semi-regular basis if you'd like, because
yeah, sure, that'd be lovely. I've enjoyed this conversation.
me too. I'd love to be able to do it like weekly if you're able to, because I really feel like I learn from you. I always have. When I, met you decades ago, you were doing cutting edge work and you were really making the whole field of geriatric mental health, which really didn't exist. You were working on this before they had palliative care, before they had hospice, before they had, before they even knew that you should be looking carefully at geriatric mental health differently than early adulthood mental health. You were doing all of that. And I think that it would be nice to take a walk down memory lane with you about how far we've come. And, so that people can really learn from you and so that I can continue to be reminded of all that we have, how we've changed as a culture and how we look at geriatrics and mental health.
I'd be delighted to talk with you more.
Excellent. So
we'll follow up on that.
This has been lovely. And I'm just going to say one more time who you are and how people can find you. So this is Michael Friedman. He is a licensed clinical social worker. He's been a geriatric mental health advocate for 50 years. He also founded the Geriatric Mental Health Alliance. He's made tons of change. And he is writing for Substack. And I was excited to read what he writes because he writes from a different perspective than I do. I write about midlife, and he writes about being old, which for him is 80s and older. And I think that it's important to hear both perspectives because he gives a realist perspective of someone who's living it and not just, it's not a mythos, somebody who's just talking about themselves. He has the research knowledge and background about what he's talking about that backs up what he's saying. So take a look at what he writes on Substack. Check out both of our work. We write differently about different things, and let either of us know or both of us know what else you'd like us to talk about. So thanks for coming on, Michael. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's great to catch up with you again.
You too.
I look forward to continuing our conversation.
Me too. So hopefully we'll be back again next week, same time. Oh, we won't because you have something to do. Maybe
I have a medical appointment which I'm thinking of canceling, but if I don't cancel it, I have to be there. So I'll let you know within a few days.
All right. Good. Thank you. Take care.
Take care.